We're here in San Diego at the 2016 American Society of Hematology conference, and I'm here with Dr. Sharman. Doctor, good to see you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So you're presenting some interesting findings on a couple of studies that you've been working on recently. Tell our audience, what are those studies and where are we at with them?
So I think maybe one set we could talk about is patients with diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. Diffuse large B-cell lymphoma is the most common type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And in the United States and frankly most everywhere, the standard of care therapy consists of R-CHOP chemotherapy. R-CHOP is a combination of 5 drugs: rituximab, cyclophosphamide, hydroxydoxorubicin, which is adriamycin, oncovin, and prednisone. And that standard regimen has been around now for quite some time, really since around the year 2000, and we're looking for how do we improve upon that. One of the drugs that may have a disproportionate amount of the side effects and really not as much of the activity in CHOP is the O, which stands for oncovin, or a drug called vincristine. And in the studies that we are presenting, we've substituted vincristine for a new experimental product that's called polatuzumab. And polatuzumab is an interesting medication. It's what we call an antibody-drug conjugate. So when you give somebody an antibody-drug conjugate, it finds the tumor. It's sort of a seek and destroy mission. It finds the tumor on its own, and it delivers a very powerful chemotherapy, but does so only into the cancer cells. So that medication doesn't go throughout the whole body per se, but it just goes into the cancer cells. And we've seen with that medication alone, even patients who failed R-CHOP, we can get many of them into remission with that drug as a single therapy. So if we put that together with R-CHOP, we hope to be able to improve upon that.
So if I understand what you're telling me about the way that this works, is in prior therapies you would go through chemotherapy and a lot of the good cells around the tumor would be affected by the chemotherapy. And so what you're suggesting is, through this study and through this therapy, is only the tumorous cells, the bad cells, are going to be targeted and affected.
Yeah, so antibodies are sort of like the guidance system on a smart bomb, if you will. And so it is able to identify B cells exclusively, and then it injects the chemotherapy. Actually, it literally puts the chemotherapy directly into the cancer cells that are identified by the antibody.
I see. So, a lot of patients in our community, they're always asking about clinical trials and what's on the horizon. And there's a lot of misnomers about some of the trials. People think that, if I go into a clinical trial and I'm getting the placebo, I'm getting some substandard care. When you talk to patients about this new innovation in clinical trials and being a candidate for that, what do you say to those patients?
My hope is that patients would ask those questions in the visit. And the reason for it is I think many of these are simply misunderstandings. Quite honestly, in many research studies, we may not even have a placebo. Or if there is a placebo in the study at all, it's very clear to the patient what the options are. Placebo studies in oncology are actually quite rare, and they're only done when there's really no other standard of care therapy available. So this particular study we're talking about, that wasn't even the case. And if this moves forward to phase 3 studies, it would probably be a randomization where people would either get standard care or the new treatment. And so there too, there would be no placebo involved in such a study.
When it comes to studies, there's different phases of the studies. What phase are you with this one? And when can people expect to see if all goes well and we have positive outcomes? When do you think this new therapy will appear on the market?
So we are currently at the conclusion of phase 2 trials and making a determination right now in terms of what might be those phase 3 type studies. So phase 2 is oftentimes a measurement of efficacy, and then we make estimations for how much we could potentially improve upon standard of care. And the next step would be phase 3 studies. And in such a study, a typical phase 3 study might be R-CHOP versus R-CHOP polatuzumab or something like that.